The night was quiet at the new Houston spaceport. Most workers had gone home hours ago. Only Daniel Carter remained, his hands covered in grease as he fixed a broken engine on a cargo shuttle. He was 32 years old, average height, with brown hair that always looked messy no matter how much he combed it. He was not a hero. He was not special. He was just a mechanic who liked his job and preferred to work alone. Daniel heard a sound from the cargo bay. It was soft, like someone trying not to be heard. He put down his tools and walked slowly toward the noise. His heart beat faster. Thieves sometimes hid in ships to steal parts. He grabbed a wrench just in case. When he opened the cargo bay door, he saw something that made him freeze. A woman lay on the floor between two large crates, but she was not human. Her skin was silver, shining softly in the dim light. Her hair was long and white like fresh snow. Her eyes, which opened when she heard him, were deep violet, like the color of a sunset he once saw as a child. She was bleeding from a wound on her side and her breathing was weak. Daniel had seen aliens on the news. Everyone had. 3 years ago, humanity made first contact with the Galactic Confederation, a group of over 300 alien species, but he had never been this close to one before. The woman tried to move away from him. Fear showed in her strange, beautiful eyes. Hey, Daniel said softly. He put down the wrench and raised his hands to show he meant no harm. I am not going to hurt you. You are injured. Let me help. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she spoke in a language he did not understand. Her voice was weak but musical, like bells in the wind. I do not understand, Daniel said. He pointed at her wound. You are hurt. I have a first aid kit. Medicine, help. She seemed to understand his gestures. After a moment, she nodded slowly. Daniel ran to get his kit. When he returned, he kneeled beside her and carefully looked at her wound. It was deep, probably from a blade. He cleaned it as gently as he could. She made small sounds of pain but did not cry out. He wrapped the wound with bandages, hoping her alien body would not reject human medicine. There, he said when he finished. Not perfect, but it will stop the bleeding. She touched the bandage and looked at him with confusion. Then she spoke again, and this time, a small device on her wrist glowed. Her next words came out in English, though her accent was strange. You helped me, she said. Why? Daniel shrugged. You were hurt, that is reason enough. You do not know who I am. Does it matter? She stared at him like he had said something impossible. I am princess of the empire. My people rule over 40 star systems. We are the oldest civilization in the known galaxy. Other species bow when they see us. Daniel scratched his head. Okay, that sounds important, but you are still hurt and hiding in a cargo bay. So whatever fancy title you have, right now you are just someone who needs help. Are you hungry? Did not answer. She kept staring at him as if trying to solve a puzzle. Daniel went to his locker and brought back a sandwich and a bottle of water. I do not know if you can eat human food, but it is all I have. She took the sandwich carefully. She sniffed it, then took a small bite. Her eyes widened slightly. It is acceptable, she said. Daniel smiled. High praise from a princess. For the next 3 days, Daniel hid in the spaceport. He brought her food and water. He changed her bandages. He told her about Earth, about his life, about the small apartment he lived in with his cat named Biscuit. He talked to fill the silence, not expecting her to care. But she listened. She listened to everything. On the second night she asked him, Do you not fear me? Should I? My people can destroy cities with a single ship. We have technology your species cannot even imagine. We have lived for thousands of years while your kind was still living in caves. Daniel thought about it. That is impressive, but you are sitting on a dirty floor eating a ham sandwich, so I think I will be okay. Made a strange sound. It took Daniel a moment to realize she was laughing. It was a soft, surprised laugh, like she had forgotten how to do it. You are very strange, she said. I have been told that before. On the third night told him what happened. A faction within her own empire wanted to use her to gain power. When she refused to marry a lord they chose for her, they tried to kill her. She escaped through a transport gate and ended up on Earth by accident. "They will find me soon," she said. "My protectors are searching the galaxy. When they arrive, I will leave and you will never see me again." Daniel felt something heavy in his chest. He had known her for only 3 days, but the thought of her leaving made him sad in a way he did not expect. "Will you be safe?" he asked. "I do not know. The faction is powerful. They may try again." "Then do not go back." Smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I am a princess. I do not get to choose." "Everyone gets to choose," Daniel said. "That is what being alive means." She looked at him for a long time. In her 200 years of life, no one had ever spoken to her like this. Everyone treated her like a symbol, a crown, a thing to be used. This human, this simple mechanic with grease on his face, treated her like a person. On the 4th day, his protectors arrived. 3 massive ships appeared in Earth's sky, causing panic across the planet. Soldiers in silver armor surrounded the spaceport. Daniel was pushed to his knees by guards who saw him as less than dirt beneath their boots. But then walked out, her wounds healed, her back straight, and her eyes burning with a fire Daniel had not seen before. "Release him," she commanded. The guards obeyed instantly. An older with golden marks on his armor stepped forward. "Your Highness, we must return immediately. Your father is worried." "I will return," said, "but first there is something I must do." She walked to Daniel and took his hand. The guards gasped. Touching a royal without permission was a crime punishable by death. "Daniel Carter," she said, her voice strong and clear, "I declare you my bonded mate by the ancient law of my people. This bond cannot be broken, not by my father, not by any lord, not by time itself." Daniel's eyes went wide. "Wait, what?" The guards looked at each other in horror. The commander's face turned pale. Smiled at Daniel, and for the first time since he met her, she looked truly happy. "I told you that I do not get to choose," she said. "I was wrong, you taught me that, and I choose you." The news spread across the galaxy within hours. A princess had chosen a human as her mate. The ancient and powerful, who saw themselves as the peak of all life, were now bound by blood to the youngest and weakest species in the Confederation. The galaxy would never be the same. It was called Prime. It was a planet of crystal towers and floating gardens, where everything shone like it was made of light. Daniel stood at the window of his guest room and stared at the city below. Ships moved through the sky like silver fish in a glass ocean. Everything was beautiful. Everything was perfect. And Daniel had never felt more out of place in his entire life. 3 weeks had passed since declared him her bonded mate. In that time, he had been taken from Earth, examined by doctors who poked him like he was a strange animal, and dressed in clothes that felt too smooth and too expensive. Everyone around him spoke in whispers. Guards followed him everywhere. Servants brought him food he could not pronounce. No one talked to him directly. They talked around him, as if he was furniture that happened to be in the room. The door opened and walked in. She wore a long silver gown that made her look like a queen from an old fairy tale. When she saw Daniel's face, her smile faded. "You are unhappy," she said. "I am confused," Daniel replied. 3 weeks ago I was fixing engines. Now I am on an alien planet about to marry a princess. It is a lot to take in." Sat beside him. "Do you regret coming with me?" Daniel looked at her. Her violet eyes were worried, and he realized that under all her power and beauty, she was scared. Scared that he would leave. Scared that she had made a mistake. "No," he said honestly. "I do not regret it. I just need time to understand this world." She took his hand. "I will help you, I promise." The wedding was set for the next day. Diplomats and royalty from across the galaxy had come to watch. Some came out of respect for the Most came to see the strange human who had somehow captured a princess. Daniel met's father, Lord Emperor of the. He was tall, even by standards, with silver skin that had begun to darken with age. His eyes were cold and hard like stones at the bottom of a frozen river. "So you are the human," the Emperor said. "Yes, sir," Daniel replied. "Do you understand what you have done? By bonding with my daughter, you have tied our bloodline to your species. A species that still fights wars over patches of dirt. A species that cannot even agree on a single language." Daniel felt his face grow hot. "With respect, sir, I did not ask for this. Your daughter chose me, and I think that says more about her than it does about me." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. For a long moment, Daniel thought he was about to be thrown out an airlock. Then the Emperor made a small sound, almost like a laugh. "You speak plainly. That is rare in this court. Everyone here uses 100 words when 10 would do. I am a mechanic. I do not know fancy words." "Perhaps that is not a bad thing." The Emperor turned away. "Do not embarrass my daughter, human. If you do, there will be no place in this galaxy where you can hide." The wedding ceremony took place in the Grand Hall of Eternity, a building so large that clouds formed near the ceiling. Thousands of beings filled the seats, representing every species in the Confederation. Cameras broadcast the event to trillions of viewers across the galaxy. Daniel walked down the aisle in a simple black suit. It was the same suit he wore to his mother's funeral 5 years ago. The had offered him robes made of fabric worth more than his entire life's earnings. He refused. Whispers followed him as he walked. He heard words like primitive and embarrassment and mistake. He kept his head high and his eyes forward. Waited at the altar. When she saw him, her face lit up with a smile that made everything else disappear. The ceremony was long and filled with rituals Daniel did not understand. He repeated words in a language that twisted his tongue. He held objects that glowed and hummed with energy. Through it all, guided him with gentle touches and patient looks. Then came the vows. A priest with 6 arms and a face like melted wax spoke in a booming voice. "The human will now recite the ancient words of devotion." Daniel had practiced the words for days. They were old and formal, full of promises about honor and duty and lineage. But as he looked at, he realized he did not want to say words written by strangers thousands of years ago. He wanted to say what was in his heart. "I am going to do something different," he said quietly. His eyes widened. "Daniel, you cannot change the ceremony. Watch me." He turned to face the crowd. Thousands of alien faces stared at him with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. He took a deep breath. "I do not know your ancient words," Daniel said. His voice echoed through the massive hall. "I do not understand your customs or your traditions. I am just a human, a mechanic from a small planet on the edge of the galaxy." The whispers grew louder. Some of the nobles looked offended. "But I know what I feel," Daniel continued. "When I look at, I do not see a princess. I do not see power or politics or bloodlines. I see a woman who laughed when I made a bad joke. I see someone who trusted me when she had no reason to. I see someone who was brave enough to choose her own path, even when everyone told her she could not." The hall fell silent. "I promised to stand beside her, not behind her. I promised to treat her as my equal because that is what she is. I promise to protect her not because she is royalty but because she is the woman I love. And I promise to be honest with her even when the truth is hard. That is all I have to offer. It is not much, but it is everything I am." For a long moment no one moved, then stepped forward. Tears ran down her silver cheeks, leaving trails of light. "I accept," she whispered. "I accept everything you are." The priest looked confused. "This is most irregular. The ancient words must be spoken." The Emperor rose from his seat. Every eye in the hall turned to him. Daniel's heart stopped. He had broken tradition in front of the entire galaxy. He expected anger. He expected punishment. Instead, the emperor nodded slowly. "The vow is made in truth," he said. "That is what matters. Proceed." The ceremony ended with pressing her forehead against Daniel's, a sign of deep connection. The crowd remained silent, unsure of how to react. But as Daniel walked down the aisle as husband and wife, something unexpected happened. A young alien in the back of the hall began to clap, then another, then a dozen, then 100. Soon the entire hall echoed with applause. The broadcast reached every corner of the Confederation. On 100 worlds, beings watched a human speak from his heart, and something stirred within them. For centuries, they had followed rules and traditions without questioning. They had married for power, not love. They had hidden their feelings behind masks of dignity. But this human, this simple mechanic, had stood before the galaxy and spoken only truth. That night, while the nobles discussed politics and alliances, Daniel sat alone on a balcony overlooking the Crystal City. Found him there. "You took a great risk today," she said. "I know. It could have gone very badly." "I know that too." She sat beside him and rested her head on his shoulder. "Why did you do it?" Daniel thought about it for a moment. "Because I did not want to start our life together with words that were not mine. If we are going to build something real, it has to be built on truth." Smiled. "You are going to change everything, Daniel Carter." "I just want to be a good husband." "You already are." Above them, the stars of 1,000 worlds shone bright. Somewhere out there, a galaxy was watching, and many of them were beginning to wonder if they had been wrong about humans all along. 6 months after the wedding, a message arrived that made the court fall silent. The hegemony had issued a formal challenge. Daniel stood in the throne room as advisors argued and shouted. They were a warrior species, he learned. They were massive creatures with 4 arms and skin like armored stone. For 1,000 years, they had been rivals of the. They respected nothing but strength. Commander, their warlord, had sent a message that was broadcast across the Confederation. His face filled the screen, ugly and with teeth like broken glass. "They have shamed themselves by bonding with animals," growled. "We invoke the ancient right of challenge. Single combat. You're human against our champion. If the human loses, the bonding is void and humanity will serve the hegemony as a slave race." The room erupted in chaos. Advisors demanded that the challenge be rejected. Generals called for war. The emperor sat on his throne with a face of stone. Daniel stepped forward. "I accept." Everyone stopped talking, grabbed his arm. "Daniel, no, you cannot. The champion has killed hundreds of warriors in single combat. He has fought species that are born for battle. You are a mechanic." "I know what I am," Daniel said calmly. "But if I refuse, every species in the galaxy will see humans as cowards. They will see you as someone who made a fool's choice. I will not let that happen." The emperor looked at him with something that might have been respect. "You understand that you will almost certainly die?" "Yes." "And you still accept?" Daniel nodded. "On Earth we have a saying. It is not about how hard you can hit. It is about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. I may not win, but I will not go down without a fight." The challenge was set for 30 days later. Daniel trained every day from sunrise to sunset. They brought their finest warrior, High Blade, to teach him. Was old by standards, with scars across his face and hands that had killed 1,000 enemies. He looked at Daniel like someone looks at a bug they are about to step on. "You are weak," said on the first day. "You are slow. Your bones break like dry twigs. How am I supposed to make a warrior out of this?" "You are not," Daniel replied. "You are supposed to make me survive." Frowned. "What is the difference?" "A warrior fights to prove his strength. I just need to not die." The training was brutal. Daniel learned to dodge attacks that would kill him with a single blow. He learned to read his enemy's movements before they happened. He learned that in a fight against a stronger opponent, patience was the only weapon that mattered. But grew frustrated. Daniel refused to fight he refused to follow the proper forms. Instead, he moved in ways that seemed random and chaotic. "You are doing it wrong," shouted after Daniel ducked under a practice blade in a way that no trained fighter would. "But I did not get hit," Daniel said. "That is not the point." Actually, it is exactly the point. On the 20th day, something changed. Attacked with a combination that had never been blocked by any student. Daniel did not block it. Instead, he stepped inside the attack, too close for the blade to cut, and placed his hand on his chest. "If I had a knife, you would be dead," Daniel said. Stared at him, then slowly he began to laugh. "You fight like no one I have ever seen," the old warrior said. "You fight like someone who has nothing to lose and everything to prove, that will not know what to do with you. That is what I am counting on." The day of combat arrived. The arena was on a neutral station, a massive ring floating in empty space. Millions of beings watched from the stands. Billions more watched on screens across the galaxy. They sat on one side, chanting war songs that shook the walls. They sat in silence, their faces tight with worry. Daniel walked into the arena wearing simple clothes. No armor, no fancy weapons, just a pair of fighting gloves his father had given him when he was 12. The champion entered from the other side. His name was the Unbroken. He was nearly 3 meters tall, covered in bone plates and scars. In his 4 hands he carried weapons that glowed with deadly energy. When he saw Daniel, he laughed. "This is the human. This is what they send to fight me. I have crushed insects bigger than him." Daniel said nothing. He just raised his fists and waited. The fight began. Attacked with terrifying speed. His blades cut through the air where Daniel had been standing a moment before. Daniel moved, dodged, rolled. He did not try to block. He did not try to counter. He just survived. The crowd grew confused. This was not how combat was supposed to look. The human was running. He was hiding. He was acting like prey. Roared with frustration. "Stand still and die with honor, you coward." Daniel kept moving. Minutes passed, then an hour. Attacks grew slower as he tired. His breathing became heavy. The bone plates on his body began to crack from the force of his own blows hitting the ground instead of his target. The crowd began to murmur. The human was still standing. The human was still moving. How was this possible? Then made a mistake. He swung all 4 arms at once, putting all his strength into a blow meant to end the fight. Daniel saw it coming. He had been waiting for exactly this moment. He stepped forward, inside the attack, just like he had done with. Arms passed over his head. For one moment the champion was open. Daniel threw a punch, then another, then a third. A simple combination right, left, right, aimed at the only unarmored spot on his body, his throat. The first punch made choke. The second made him stumble. The third sent him crashing to the ground. The arena fell completely silent. Daniel stood over the fallen champion, blood running from a dozen cuts on his body. His left arm hung at a wrong angle. His face was swollen and bruised, but he was standing. "Do you yield?" he asked. Looked up at him with something new in his eyes. Not anger, not hatred, fear. "I yield," the champion whispered. The silence broke like a dam. The section erupted in chaos. They began to cheer. Across the galaxy, beings stared at their screens in disbelief. Daniel Carter, a human mechanic with no military training, had defeated the greatest warrior of the hegemony. Ran into the arena and caught Daniel as his legs finally gave out. Tears streamed down her face. "You foolish, brave, impossible man," she said. Daniel smiled through his broken lips. "Did I do okay?" "You did more than okay. You showed the galaxy what humans are made of." In the stands, Commander sat in stunned silence. He had expected to humiliate Instead, He had witnessed something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The human should have died. He should have surrendered. No species fought like that. No species took that much punishment and kept going. What were these humans? That question would be asked on 1,000 worlds in the days to come. And for the first time, the galaxy began to look at humanity not with contempt, but with something very close to awe. 5 years passed after the fight with the Unbroken. Daniel Carter became one of the most famous beings in the galaxy, but he refused to act like it. When they offered him titles and lands, he politely declined. When they wanted to build statues of him, he asked them to build schools instead. When nobles invited him to grand parties, he usually found an excuse to stay home. Instead of living in the royal palace, Daniel opened a repair shop on the lower levels of the capital city. It was a small place, squeezed between a food stall and a fabric store. He fixed ships, machines, and anything else people brought to him. He charged fair prices and never asked where his customers came from. At first, the nobles were confused. A member of the royal family working with his hands was unheard of. Some were offended, but Daniel did not care what they thought. Visited him every afternoon when her duties allowed. She would sit on a workbench and watch him take apart engines while he told her about the strange people who came to his shop. "A soldier came today," Daniel said one evening, wiping grease from his fingers. His ship had a damaged power core. He was scared to ask for help because he thought I would refuse. "What did you do?" "I fixed his ship. Then I gave him a cup of coffee and taught him how to do basic repairs himself. He cried a little. I pretended not to notice." Smiled. "You are changing things, Daniel, slowly but truly." She was right. Word spread about the human who treated everyone the same. Merchants who had been ignored by noble repair shops came to Daniel. Refugees from war-torn planets found a place where no one judged them. Soldiers who had lost faith in themselves found a man who believed that everyone had value. The repair shop became something more than a business. It became a symbol. A scientist named Scholar had been studying humanity for years. She had read their history, watched their broadcasts, and interviewed their diplomats. But she did not understand them until she visited Daniel's shop. She watched him work for a full day. She saw him argue with a customer about the right price, insisting that he would not overcharge. She saw him teach a young child how to use a wrench. She saw him stop working to have lunch with, laughing at a joke only they understood. That night she began to write. Her paper was called The Human Paradox. It spread through academic circles like fire through dry grass. "Humans should not exist," she wrote. "They are weak compared to most species. Their lives are short, barely a century at most. Their planet is harsh, full of predators and disasters. By all logic, they should have died out long ago." But they did not die. They survived. And in surviving, they developed qualities that are rare in the galaxy. Humans form deep bonds quickly because they know their time is limited. They sacrifice themselves for strangers because they understand that everyone is connected. They create beauty even in the darkest times because they refuse to let darkness win. They laugh at death because they have faced it so many times that fear has lost its power. They live for 1,000 years. We have time for everything. But humans live like every moment matters because for them it does. This is not a weakness. This is a strength we have forgotten. The paper caused an uproar. Many species rejected it as propaganda. How could the youngest species in the Confederation have anything to teach the ancient empires? But others listened. They began to study human history more carefully. They read about humans who gave their lives to save others. They watched human art that made them feel emotions they had buried long ago. They heard human music that spoke of love and loss and hope. On a distant world, a warlord read a human poem about a soldier who missed his family. He thought about his own children, whom he had not seen in 20 years. That night, he resigned his command and went home. On a space station near the galactic core, a merchant prince who had cheated thousands of customers watched a human film about redemption. The next day, he began repaying his debts. Young nobles who had never questioned tradition began asking why things had to be the way they were. Some of them visited Daniel's shop. Some of them stayed to learn. Saw all of this happening. She had always known that Daniel was special, but even she had not expected this. "You are changing the galaxy," she told him one night as they lay in bed. "I am just fixing ships," Daniel replied. "You are doing more than that. You are showing people that there is another way to live." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "On Earth, we have a lot of problems. War, poverty, hate. We are not perfect. We are not even close. But you keep trying." "Yes, we keep trying. That is all we know how to do." Pushed for reforms in the court. She fought for laws that protected the poor and gave voice to the voiceless. She argued that strength was not measured by how many ships you had, but by how you treated those who had nothing. Many nobles opposed her. Some called her a traitor to her people, but she did not stop. "They will hate you for this," Daniel warned her. "Let them hate me. I would rather be hated for doing right than loved for doing nothing." Daniel smiled. "You sound like a human." "I had a good teacher." The changes were slow, but they were real. Trade treaties were rewritten to be more fair. Planets that had been exploited for centuries began to receive aid. Species that had been treated as lesser beings were invited to join councils and discussions. Not everyone was happy. The old powers resented losing their advantages. Whispers of rebellion spread through dark corners. Enemies plotted in shadows. But something had shifted in the galaxy. A new idea had taken root. The idea that maybe, just maybe, there was more to strength than size and power. The idea that a short-lived species from a small planet might have wisdom worth learning. Daniel kept working in his shop. He kept fixing ships and drinking coffee and telling bad jokes. He did not see himself as important. He was just living his life the only way he knew how. But across the stars, billions of beings were watching, and they were beginning to ask themselves a question that had never occurred to them before. If a human could stand against a champion and win through pure will, what else might humans be capable of? If a mechanic could marry a princess and earn the respect of emperors, what did that say about the old rules? If one man could change the thinking of entire civilizations just by being kind, what might happen if more people tried to do the same? The answers to those questions would come sooner than anyone expected, because in the darkness between galaxies, something ancient was waking, something that had not moved in 1,000,000 years. And when it came, the galaxy would need every bit of human stubbornness it could find. The warning came from the edge of known space. A research station stopped sending signals. Then a colony world went silent. Then an entire star system vanished from all maps. Scouts were sent to investigate. Only one returned. The pilot was found dead at the controls, his face frozen in an expression of pure terror. Before he died, he had managed to send one word. "Hollow." The Galactic Confederation had records of the Hollow in their oldest archives. They were a swarm intelligence from the void between galaxies, creatures of pure destruction that had no thoughts except hunger. They came every few million years, sweeping through the galaxy like a wave of death. Every civilization that faced them had been destroyed. There was no negotiation with the Hollow. There was no diplomacy. There was only death or survival. And no one had ever survived. Panic spread across the Confederation. Old alliances crumbled as species began to think only of themselves. Some tried to flee to the farthest edges of the galaxy, hoping the Hollow would not follow. Others surrendered to despair and simply waited to die. The council met in emergency session. Daniel stood beside and listened as advisors argued. "We must preserve what we can," one general said. "Evacuate our core worlds. Let the outer systems fall and hope the hollow are satisfied." "They are never satisfied," another replied. "They will consume everything. It is what they do." "Then what would you have us do? Fight a force that has destroyed 1,000 civilizations?" Silence filled the room. No one had an answer. Daniel stepped forward. "I want to say something," he said. The council members looked at him with a mixture of hope and exhaustion. In 10 years, Daniel had earned their respect, but they did not expect him to have a solution that had escaped their greatest minds. "I do not know how to defeat the Hollow," Daniel began. "I am not a general or a scientist, but I know something about fighting when the odds are against you." He looked around the room. "On Earth, we have faced extinction many times, ice ages that froze our planet, diseases that killed half our population, wars that made us question whether we deserved to survive. Every time someone stood up and said it was hopeless. Every time someone else refused to listen." His voice grew stronger. "The Hollow are coming. They may destroy us. But what kind of legacy do we leave if we run? What story do we tell the species that might come after us, that we saw darkness and gave up?" He turned too. She nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I am not asking you to win," Daniel said. "I am asking you to fight. Because even if we fall, we can fall standing up. We can show the universe that life does not go quietly into the dark." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the Emperor, old and tired, rose from his seat. "The human speaks truth," Lord said. "They have never fled from battle. We will not start now." One by one, other delegates stood. The merchants of the outer reach, the scientists of the core worlds, species that had been enemies for centuries now stood together. The war against the Hollow began. It was the worst conflict the galaxy had ever seen. Entire fleets were swallowed by the swarm, planets burned, heroes died by the millions. The Hollow seemed endless, an ocean of death that could not be stopped. But the Confederation did not break. Led diplomatic efforts, holding the alliance together when fear threatened to tear it apart. She spoke with her husband's words in her heart, reminding everyone why they were fighting. Daniel did not stay safe behind the lines. He flew supply missions to besieged worlds. He helped evacuate civilians from dying planets. He held the hands of wounded soldiers and told them they were brave. Years passed, the galaxy bled, but slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. Scientists from 100 species worked together to build a weapon. It was a device that could disrupt the Hollow's hive mind, breaking their connection to each other. Without their shared intelligence, the swarm would collapse. But the weapon had to be delivered to the heart of the swarm, and no ship that entered had ever come out. Daniel volunteered. "No," said when she heard, her voice broke, "I will not let you." They stood in their home, the one they had built together over 10 years. Pictures of their life covered the walls. A cup of coffee, half finished, sat on the table. "Someone has to do it," Daniel said softly. "Then let it be someone else. You have given enough. The galaxy does not have the right to ask more from you." Daniel took her hands. "The galaxy is not asking. I am choosing, just like you chose me all those years ago." Tears ran down his face. "How am I supposed to live without you?" "You will live the way you always have, with courage and grace, and you will tell our story so that others can learn from it." "I do not want to tell stories. I want you here with me." Daniel pulled her close. "I know, and if there was any other way I would take it, but this is the only way, and if my life can buy a future for everyone else, then it is worth spending." They held each other for a long time, neither wanting to let go. The next morning, Daniel boarded a small ship loaded with the weapon. The entire Confederation watched as he flew toward the swarm. The Hollow tried to stop him. Thousands of their creatures threw themselves at his ship. He dodged and weaved, using every trick he had learned in his life. His shields failed. His engines burned, but he kept going. "Tell I loved her," he said into the radio, knowing she was listening. Tell her that meeting her was the best thing that ever happened to a simple mechanic from Earth. He reached the heart of the swarm. This is for everyone, he whispered. He activated the weapon. Light exploded across space, brighter than 1,000 suns. The hollow screamed, a sound that echoed across every frequency. Their connection shattered. Their intelligence dissolved. Billions of creatures that had been one mind became nothing but mindless husks, drifting dead in the void. The swarm collapsed. The war was over. Daniel Carter did not return. Centuries later, statues of Daniel stood on 1,000 worlds. Not statues of a warrior in armor or a king on a throne. Statues of a man in simple clothes, with grease-stained hands and a kind smile. Lived for 800 more years. She became the greatest leader in history, reshaping the Confederation into something more fair and more compassionate than it had ever been. She never took another mate. On the anniversary of Daniel's sacrifice, she would visit the memorial built in his honor. It was a simple stone in a garden filled with flowers from Earth. "You changed everything," she would say to the stone. "You showed us that strength is not about living forever. It is about what you do with the time you have." On Earth, children grew up hearing the story of Daniel Carter, the mechanic who married a princess and saved the galaxy. They learned that heroes did not need to be born special. They just needed to be brave enough to do what was right. And somewhere in the depths of space, scholars recorded a truth that would echo through the ages. In all the vast history of the universe, it was humanity, the small and short-lived newcomers, who reminded the galaxy what it truly meant to be alive. To love fiercely, to fight stubbornly, to hope endlessly, to stand up when falling down would be easier. To be human. And that, more than any weapon or technology, was the gift that Daniel Carter gave to the stars.